Welcome to What's Next from AgResearch, a podcast exploring science answers to big questions. I'm Erin. I work for AgResearch, but I'm not a scientist. I do have a lot of questions about our science, and I thought that you might too. In this episode, I'm asking if there's a place for mātauranga Māori in farming. Is it the same as and equal to Western science? And how does it work to weave it into our current farming practices? AgResearch Kaiārahai Matua, or Director of Māori Research and Partnerships, Ariana Estoras from Ngāti Maniapoto, knows a fair bit about this, having appeared in the media answering this question more than once. Originally trained as a scientist, Ariana has worked in both New Zealand and the UK and came home to work with Māori agri-partnerships to help them realise their goals. Tēnā koe, Ariana.
Tēnā koe, Erin. Kei te pihia koe.
Oh, kei te pai au. Firstly, can you tell me what you want people to know about mātauranga Māori?
I think there are three things that I'd like people to know about mātauranga Māori. The first is that mātauranga Māori is part of a wider system and body of knowledge that make up the Māori worldview, or the tauranga Māori. And actually in that world, we don't separate them. We kind of think about it as a whole system. So that's the first thing that I'd like to say about mātauranga Māori. The second is that there is absolutely a place for mātauranga Māori and science for the benefit of the farming community. And I hope to share a few examples around that soon. And then the third is that, so mātauranga Māori is a part of a wider system, forming up the Māori worldview, has definitely been interrupted in our history. And so there is a renaissance, a regeneration of that knowledge at the moment that's going on, and a lot of reconnecting back to that knowledge, some of which has been lost forever and some which hasn't, and that we're reconnecting with now.
And so you said there is a place for mātauranga Māori in farming and alongside Western science. Is it complementary or is it a whole separate thing? How does that weaving together work?
So in the examples where we've seen it come together really well to benefit the farming community, it is complementary. And so we've seen that with research related to the Māori calendar, or the maramataka, which builds upon kind of the lunar calendar and tells us traditional information around planting. Planting before we had what we call farming today, so traditional practices around farming. And so using that body of knowledge alongside kind of contemporary agricultural, well-known and well-understood cultivation practices in terms of agricultural science, and so they become complementary in that one is informing the other. I think the really exciting space is the innovation that can come next. So that's where we really get the weaving together and the creation of something new. And that's the innovation that could occur for the farming community.
And when we talk about innovation, it's probably fair to say that your ancestors were pretty damn innovative, right?
I think so, Erin. And I think the strongest examples and evidence of that are the navigation narratives from Eastern Polynesia down into Aotearoa New Zealand. And so it's been very useful to build that evidence base around, I guess, recorrecting myths around how those journeys took place, and how many environmental indicators were, categorised, interpreted, analysed, and used by navigators who were coming from Eastern Polynesia and then eventually settling in Aotearoa, being our predecessors of Māori in New Zealand. So we definitely had to be innovative, because the migrations were based on survival of groups of people who no longer could live where they were living for various reasons, whether that was warfare or populations outgrowing the landmass. And so, having a real drive to find new lands for the ongoing generations to survive, I think there's no greater driver of innovation than survival. And so that's what we've seen through the evidence base around those environmental indicators.
And all of that without Western mathematics, which, is what a lot of European sailing and exploration was done on, right?
Yes, well, that's right. And no kind of traditional navigation tools that we would have seen in the Western world, but very much environmental indicators from ocean currents to star navigation through the migration patterns of birds. So very, very much interlinked with the environment.
You might think, we're supposed to be talking about agriculture. Why are we talking about sailing? But like you've said, it's environmental indicators and it's looking at the world around you. So the two things are very much linked. One of the things I've read about mātauranga Māori is that it can also provide a shortcut. And I suppose that's because of where it's done. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Well, we have seen with the body of knowledge that exists around rongoā rākau, which is Māori medicines, and this is in relationship to, I guess, health and before there was kind of Western medicines, that a lot of native plants held a lot of the answers to the ailments of the times before we had English settlers in New Zealand. And so from those many generations of understanding and using rongoā rākau, they were able to determine what plants did what at what times of the year, et cetera, et cetera. So they'd really built up a good understanding of where to go to in order to relieve certain ailments, whether it was kawa for stomach ailments or other native plants for poultices and things like that. So when we had some rongoā practitioners approach us at AgResearch, we thought, well, what on earth are we going to have to add to that body of knowledge where, an agricultural organisation, production animals, so on and so forth. But actually, there was a lot that we could do together. And so what we have found is that in the application of rongoā rākau, or the principles of it around the native plants and the application into animals, particularly production animals, that there are ways to quickly identify plants that we would want to work with, and also bioactive elements within those plants to hone in on or to focus in on very quickly. And then applying those for animal health diseases such as parasites and so on and so forth. In that example, you can see an acceleration from, I guess, screening a forest through to actually focusing in on specific plants and focusing in on bioactive elements of that plant that we know already create relief or cures in human diseases, and then how that translates over into animals.
So there really is a bit of a shortcut.
It's a bit of a shortcut from screening the forest to honing in on a few plants and the specific elements of them. Yeah.
So I think one of the things that can be hard to wrap your head around as non-Māori is that there is a spiritual element to mātauranga. So when you're from a Western background, it can be kind of hard to reconcile. But what does it look like in a practical sense?
Yeah, so at the beginning, I talked about mātauranga Māori being part of a wider system and body of knowledge. And so that really, it goes back to our creation stories of and narratives that we understand and believe as Māori. So that actually, like, the spiritual and the physical elements of knowledge are, they do work hand in hand. And yeah, I can understand why it can be quite hard to connect with, particularly if you haven't been brought up in that kind of world. And I think that's why it's really important to work directly with the holders of mātauranga Māori. So mātauranga Māori is always associated with a place or a group of people from that place, and they are essentially the holders. Now, the holders they'll determine what parts of that will become available in these research initiatives together and what parts of that won't. And so you can think of those people as navigating you through which parts of mātauranga Māori you need to be aware of and which parts that you probably don't need to be aware of, and guide you through that.
You know that the things that hit the headlines are always the exceptions. But, when someone says, we can't do that because someone said that there's a taniwha there. Now, I'm assuming that there's actually regardless of what you believe, there's something in that, right?
Yes, so that's a really good example, Erin. So there are a lot of narratives around taniwha, and I think that the very famous one was in relationship to the Waikato Expressway and how part of that roading may need to have been augmented because of a Waikato awa narrative around a taniwha. So what I would say here is that in those narratives are messages, learnings, and lessons. And so we know that they are transmitted in this form because they transmit really well over many generations. So within a kōrero related to taniwha or narrative, within that we immediately know as Māori it's a cautionary message that is associated with that particular identity, or what we call kaitiaki, kind of a guardian. And so there'll be some messaging in there that we want our future generations to take notice of and to exercise caution, because there could have been, or any number of things that might have happened in that particular area of the awa, hundreds and hundreds of years ago that may still occur today. And so it's just a really useful way to transmit lessons and for that to pass over into many generations. And it's like a really good horror story or a really good scary tale. Kind of the more that is embellished and associated with it, the more it becomes memorable. And so there are aspects of that associated with narratives like taniwha and the mātauranga that sits within it.
Do you have to be Māori to incorporate mātauranga into your farming, and how would you do that?
Well, I talked about holders of mātauranga Māori, and because it is very place-based and linked to people. So, working in with your local hapu, your tangata whenua, your mana whenua, will absolutely be where mātauranga are associated with your region, with your catchment will lie. And so those relationships, I think, are very important for farming communities. But I know how busy farmers are. And so I really think that roles like our rural consultants, our farm consultants become a very, very critical connector and catalyst in the farming community. Because we already see that with research, science coming out of institutes like AgResearch, and that being turned into something very useful for the farming communities, and our rural professionals are a key part of that. And I could see that would be a really important role that they could play around mātauranga Māori as well. Now, that's not to say they have to be experts at it, but really that connecting of the knowledge holders and the knowledge through to the farming communities.
I think in other episodes in this podcast, we're talking about connections past the farm gate, beyond farm boundaries and things like that. So that really seems to make a lot of sense in terms of how we move forward in New Zealand in farming. One of the recent conversations that we've seen in the media is about genetic technology regulations being relaxed by the government. And there's been questions about, whether that's compatible with mātauranga Māori, gene technology, gene editing, things like that. How is that going to work?
Well, we've been having a lot of conversations on this exact topic because of research that we have underway here at AgResearch. And so what I can say is that through the numerous Māori groups that we are meeting with, that there are some discussions which are still very much in that space of mistrust, maybe not fully understanding some of the technicalities of how technology evolves and risk changes and benefits change. But there's also a growing group of, I'd say more towards the business end of Māori organisations who are very interested to understand the risks and the benefits of the technology and the risks and the benefits of not doing anything as well. So that we definitely were not hearing about that when you think back to the days of GM moratorium. So I think there is a maturing of understanding and discussions being had amongst Māori. Just on the reducing of kind of barriers around the gene tech regulator that is coming out. So that's just in policy now and needs to be turned into the regs and the legislation. But one of the key things about it is about different pathways for gene technologies in health versus gene technologies in every other area, including agriculture. And this is a really important point because amongst those groups, those many Māori groups that we're talking to about this kind of technology and research, now, when you talk to them about the technology in relationship to forages, production animals, or anything in that kind of agricultural economic space, they find it very hard to kind of connect with and to really know why I should care. When you talk about it in the health sense, and it's related to a cure for cancer or any other ailment that they've lost a loved one to, it becomes a very, very different discussion. And I think it's probably what we would see across society when it becomes much closer to home. The way that you look at risks and benefits changes very differently, and we see that with Māori communities as well. So I think this new system will work to enable technologies in the health sector, which is, I think, probably more amenable to Māori communities than in other areas.
Māori agribusinesses brought in about $2.5 billion in 2018, and it's grown significantly since then. Māori agribusinesses are the biggest part of the Māori economy and a significant contributor to the country's economy as a whole. Now, it might be easy to say that a Māori agribusiness is exactly the same as any other enterprise in the primary sector, but there are some differences that can and do work really well to support iwi, hapu and hapori, or communities, right across the motu. One of those Māori-led businesses is Alps to Ocean Foods, owned by Daniel Carson of Ngāi Tahu. With a background in technology and electronics and not having grown up on a farm, you might not expect him to be making waves in agriculture, but it's exactly this outside perspective and his te ao Māori values that he thinks has helped him come up with a very clever solution to a thorny problem. Tēnā koe, Daniel.
Kia ora, thank you for having me.
While we will talk about your product, Miti, shortly, because as much as it's about food, it's so much bigger than that. It's more of an example of the kind of product and system change that can come about from applying values to business. So let's start by talking about what Alps to Ocean Food does. Tell me more about your what, I suppose.
Well, we set up Alps to Ocean Foods to add value through solving some of New Zealand agriculture's biggest problems. So in this particular case, we're looking at non-replacement calf, or the bobby calf issue, and how do we solve that, but at the same time make something that's innovative, that we can export, and that I suppose shares our values with the world.
So I have to say that when I was married to a dairy farmer and we moved on to the first dairy farm, the bobby calf issue really was so present in my face, and it made me really uncomfortable. And I know that a lot of that came from being a townie and it being new, but it was prickly for me.
Yeah, well, it is probably one of New Zealand's largest issues in agriculture. It's obviously a major animal welfare issue, and it's going to have a major impact in the future on dairy's social license to operate. And I know there's a lot of animal welfare groups, SPCA, et cetera, that are really concerned about this. And along those lines, they've actually come on board with us to help us with a solution around the SPCA certified aspect of our animal welfare standards. So as a former bull beef farmer, I used to pick these animals up at 4 days of age, grow them out to 600 kilos in 18 months. And I knew that every single animal I didn't choose was going to end up on that truck. There was nothing wrong with the animal. It's just that no one had a use for them. So I was like, well, how can we develop a system that makes use of these calves, provides a life beyond 4 days, and helps export our values to the world?
You've come into farming from a completely non-farming background. How did you kind of learn all the things you needed to get going quickly? Because, farming is nothing if not fast moving.
Yes, I'm an avid reader of science, technology news, and we've got some excellent resources from AgResearch, from Beef and Lamb, Dairy NZ. There's a lot of information out there that you can choose to learn with. But we incorporated technology right from day one when I started farming. So we were able to manage everything through measurement. So we knew if things were working or not working, and we were able to iterate or change or modify the way we're doing things in order to make sure that we were learning pretty quick.
So tell me about this system that you've sort of developed. Like tell me about what Alps to Ocean Food does.
Well, with 1.8 million plus bobby calves going on trucks at 4 days of age at the moment, every year in New Zealand, it just makes no sense. There's nothing wrong with the animals. It's just that we don't have a particular use case for them. So I knew as a bull beef farmer that what we were producing was in demand by these large corporates, McDonald's, Nestle, Costco, et cetera, that are also asking for these lower carbon beef supply chain. So I'm like, well, what dairy beef is perfect for is a manufacturing ingredient. And manufacturing ingredients also allow us, but also other entrepreneurs, other businesses, to add a lot of value to what we're producing in New Zealand and then export it offshore. So I always found it a bit bizarre as to why New Zealand, which is known for our clean green image and our red meat exports, why we never had a recognised meat snack available globally. We don't even have necessarily one in New Zealand. Everything we sort of have is a copy of a South African or an American product, biltong, jerky, etc. So I thought, well, why don't we start off with this manufacturing beef, mix it with some other really unique New Zealand ingredients, and wrap it in a story that sort of exports our values to the world.
So there's not just an animal welfare benefit to this, there's an environmental impact too. Yeah,
correct. So emissions are ultimately an output of how long an animal's alive for and how much feed it eats. So in our particular case, I knew that the amount of maintenance feed equaled the amount of methane output from an animal. So for example, a 500 kilo animal consumes a lot more feed just to maintain its existing weight before it starts putting on weight. So it's putting out a lot more methane every day. So we just decided that the optimum was to reduce the age of these animals at processing, but we could also design it around a system that works for farmers so that we could eliminate the winter. So the key is just to put as much weight on these animals as fast as possible. And these animals do perform very well as long as you feed them properly. And it allowed us to create a system that not only works for farmers, but provides a whole lot more animals potentially a new life. And it's also very low emissions, because the other great thing about dairy beef is that the majority of the emissions of the calf are tied to the mother's milk production, because the calf is just a byproduct of her milk production. Whereas in the beef animal, the mother exists just to produce milk for the calf. So a lot more energy inefficient or emissions inefficient from that perspective.
So I think you've thought about your audience, which is a really great place to start with any kind of operation, isn't it, really? You've thought about the end users there. And how do you think being a Māori enterprise has shaped what you're doing?
I think we can change the whole system. So the system at the moment isn't really working for farmers or necessarily for the consumers. There's a lot of people in the middle that are benefiting, but I think there's an opportunity to redistribute the benefits a bit more widely. And also, I really do love the environment. I care about New Zealand. I care about the future of New Zealand. And so we took this approach that's all about making mokopuna decisions today. So decisions for our grandchildren and what I would like to see being different in the future. And in that case, we get rid of an animal welfare issue, which is potentially going to impact our social license to operate from a dairy perspective. Plus, we also bring a whole lot of onshore manufacturing, which allows us to increase our exports offshore.
So it feels kind of win-win-win. So let's talk about your product, Meaty. What is it?
Well, Meaty is a unique meat snack. It's got 12 months of shelf life, stable at room temperature, and it's all natural. So there's only 9 natural ingredients. We use honey or honeydew honey from the Black Beach Forest of the South Island as the preservative. So it's a really nice combination of protein and energy. We also use some other unique New Zealand ingredients. We've got carnuka in there as well. We've got a little bit of Marlborough flaky sea salt. We've got some paprika, and so it's a really interesting ingredients just to give it a unique taste. And it was sort of designed to probably mostly cater to an Asian demographic because that's where we see probably our first export opportunities.
Look, I have, people may have tried this actually because you had it on display and sampling at Field Days last year in 2023. And I have to admit, meat jerky has never really been something that appealed to me, like a meat snack. I was like, okay, it's delicious. And as soon as I ate it, I was like, oh, you know what? I could see myself putting this in my children's lunch boxes for them to eat. And actually, I'd probably have a little bit off the side as well. Like it's so surprisingly yummy.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. And obviously, all food, the number one thing you got to get right is the taste. Otherwise people will try it once and they won't rebuy it. So we did focus on the taste, and we also focused on the texture. So, majority of people, the issue they might have with jerky or biltong is just how tough it is. So we can reinvent what that eating sensory experience is like. So there's been obviously a lot of food technology involved, been a lot of science involved. It's not that simple to use all natural ingredients and get a long shelf life.
So there's an awful lot of science questions in there. You've been working with some of my colleagues at AgResearch. Can you tell me a bit about the work that you've done with us and how it's all worked out?
As a lover of science and an avid reader of what's coming forward, I knew that there were people within AgResearch that had all the answers to this puzzle piece we had to solve for this non-replacement issue. So we've engaged in a lot of different areas with different scientists at all the different stages that we needed to solve. So we've engaged with the meat team around the nutritional composition of this meat and also around efficient processing on venison chains so that we're not competing for space with cows on beef chains, and they're also perfectly suited for this size. We've done a lot of work with the environmental life cycle analysis team or life cycle assessment team to prove out what the carbon footprint is of this system, and those results are going to be out very shortly, and it's very exciting. I think a lot of people are going to be quite interested to talk about the outcome of that. And we've also engaged with the nutritional team around Meaty and what benefits it actually has to human health through consumption. So we're doing some things on the gut microbiome impact, neurotransmitter impact testing, and we've got another couple of exciting projects after that coming in the pipeline as well.
Gosh, well, you're really keeping us very busy, and it seems like it's going to really benefit your business so well.
Well, yeah, it's all about adding value. So we've tried to tick as many boxes as possible because we know that there's going to be people that are going to doubt or going to ask questions about what we're trying to do. But if we have answers and it's all verified by science, then, it just opens those doors to so many different opportunities for New Zealand Inc.
It really sounds like you've thought of everything, all of the aspects. You've been living and breathing this for a while now, yeah?
Yeah, correct. Like it's been a 3-year process to get to this point, and I've just gone all in recently, but I just think there's so much opportunity in the space, and everything just keeps falling into place. Consumer trends, what the industry needs, the science that's coming forward, that just reinforces to me that there is a real opportunity here. And as long as we get New Zealand Inc. support and other innovators maybe start looking at other ways to use this ingredient as well in their own added value low carbon products, then there's a huge future for these non-replacement carbs. Because the problem we have in New Zealand is far bigger than anywhere else in the world. which means that we've actually got a moat that we can protect because no one else could replicate the model that we would have.
It sounds like a great option. So what's a farmer who would maybe like to become a supplier to you? How would I go about doing that?
We can go to miti.nz, so miti.nz, and register your interest for supply. We do have a huge backlog already of farmers wanting to supply. So we are paying $8 a kilo for these animals. So it's much better than what's currently available. But that's to make sure that the whole supply chain, especially calf rearers, get rewarded for the effort they put in and that they can invest in their own businesses. Because, for this to scale, everybody from the calf, from where it's born through to the rearer, through to the finisher, everyone has to have that sort of equal benefit, but also that guaranteed money at the end of the day so that they're not speculating year in, year out.
And that really comes back again to those te ao Māori views, and you're making mokopuna decisions, that's providing, it's so much more than business.
We're all about partnerships. So people want to work with us when they know that we're not using them for one particular thing. We're actually trying to do something that will also benefit them in time as well. So we're looking with partners with shared values, and we've got a product with specific values wrapped around it. And together, I think we can export those values. And I think it'll resonate quite well with the wider world.
And what about if I like the sound of meaty and I think, gosh, I would like to try that? Is it available to buy yet?
We'll be very shortly. We're just about to manufacture 35,000 packets. And so that will be available, depending on when you're listening to this podcast, via Pledge Me. If you go to pledgeme.co.nz, there's a campaign currently running. But otherwise, just go to our website and you'll be able to purchase it online there, assuming we haven't sold out.
Well, that's the ideal outcome, isn't it, really? Although 35,000 that's a big number. So that's pretty exciting. So your website is miti.nz.
Yes.
And the Pledge Me runs until the 22nd of November.
Correct.
Fantastic. If there's anything else you want to know about this, we'll make sure we pop it in the show notes, which is agresearch.co.nz/podcast. So Māori have always been innovators, and that is going to continue. Daniel is just one example of loads of people operating Māori agribusinesses doing great things across New Zealand, and it's really exciting to see all of the great ideas that they come up with as we learn what's next. AgResearch works with Māori enterprises to help them thrive, partnering on everything from the health of the whenua through to product testing and everything in between. To find out how our Māori research and partnerships team can help you and your whānau, go to agresearch.co.nz/podcast or click the link in the show notes.